Hey, I'm Mitchell Armstrong-Grundy, and I am a behavior intervention specialist teacher here in Minnesota.
Awesome, awesome. And how did you get in the field of education? Where did you begin?
That is such a good story that I like. It's just a regular story. But I actually got my degree in music education in 2013, and from Washington State. Nobody was hiring. Nevada was. I moved down to Nevada, and while I was waiting for my license to come through, I subbed, and I subbed my very first day in a we call it Fed 4 or the highest needs autism spectrum disorder classroom. And 20 minutes in, I was like, I got the wrong degree. I'm going to totally change course. So from that day, I've been in special ed. From that point on, I went through a specific program, an alternative route to licensure that was just completely inclusive of teaching with a mentor in my field. So that was on the ground work. It was really awesome. I did that for 4 years. And then we and then I just moved to Minnesota with my husband. I'm trying to think, what did we do? We did so much stuff, but it's been a long time.
It's been long. Can you talk a little about working with children with autism?
Yeah, I
How was that?
it's it's so unique. In my other licensure, which was the one I always wanted, primary was my early childhood special ed licensure, and that's what I've done most of my career. But I've been lucky enough to specifically bring in kiddos who are more profoundly impacted. Whatever that looks like. And so a lot of my students are under the label of eligibility of developmental delay because that's what you can get up till 7. But parents, we have these conversations. It's very nuanced and it's amazing. And I love that work. It is not easy all the time, nor is any job. And I think that I even stopped saying like, when you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism because yes, and there are other pieces about it. So it's neat to see little kiddos and then just dig into that support system from there in that way early.
So were they verbal or nonverbal? A mix?
Yeah, I would say so. Last year was my last year in my classroom specifically, and I had 8 morning kiddos and 8 afternoon kiddos, 2 paraprofessionals, and we were contained 100% of our day. I think 2 kiddos, maybe 3, had more than 2 or 3 words. So we had to do a lot with our nonverbal communication and our picture exchange communication and all of that super creative stuff, which sounds fun, but it's not when I can't figure out I'm not serving kids if I can't figure out what's going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a weird age too, in that sometimes they just burst with language, regardless of their exceptionality, but also they're 3. And
Yeah.
3-year-olds are the biggest bossiest people in the whole wide world.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have so I'm a special education administrator, and in my program there's 4 alternative classrooms, and it ranges from kindergarten all the way up to 6th grade, right? So I have like a all K class, all 1st grade
Yeah.
class, a 2nd through 4th grade class, and a 4th grade through 6th grade class, plus a PALS program that has children with autism. So that was that five programs. And this is my first year working with kids with autism. So everything else has been general education.
Yeah.
All my 18 years plus in the classroom, general education. And then after that, I started working in special education. But this year specifically, it's with children with autism, and it's a lot. It is such an eye opener. It's such a learning experience for me. Like everybody's different, and one of the goals I'm trying to do is how do I include them? How do I include them in the general education population? How do we have structure and routine and come down and eat lunch with everybody or have recess with everybody? And,
Absolutely.
how do we include them in the classroom?
Yeah.
Those are some of the things we're trying to do in my
Mhm.
program. Did you do that as well?
I
Or
love that. And I really, those first 4 years, and again, I loved it, but it was the most difficult period because you're in a baptism by fire in teaching. And
Mhm.
you were so correct in that in Minnesota, for example, there is a licensure for all special ed and that except autism. And then my license is specific. You have to be well versed in that because it
Mhm.
is uniquely different. But my kiddos, I had 3rd through 5th grade for those 3 years. So I got to be with them for all that time. And my first principal was a prior emotional behavior disorder teacher. So she didn't put up with anything from her teachers in terms of like, we're all going to be together. And it almost aired on the side of like, we have to be a little bit more considerate because you're going to be at every assembly. You're going to be at you're coming down to lunch,
Mm-hmm.
and I will come get you. And
Mm-hmm.
so it really, it was like a kick in the butt. I was the only one that got nervous because I didn't want anything to happen to my students. I could care less about other people for the most part, but I wanted them to be able to be supported. And like an assembly is, how do we support all of our kids' sensory needs? We had to be on point.
Mm-hmm.
That's the end of story, period.
Yeah, it just I could just take assemblies. Um, just this year, our kids are going to the assemblies,
Yeah.
and um, there was this drum soloist, and it got too loud, and then one of the kids got upset, got triggered,
Yeah.
and started to wanted to leave, and he didn't know how to escape.
Yeah.
It was dark, and he didn't know where he was at,
Oh,
and
buddy.
it was a tough situation. So one of the things was like, how do we understand what triggers all of our students?
Absolutely.
How do we know all of our students, know their triggers, and then make sure that we have accommodations in place so that when something happens, we all know what to do. And that was a learning experience for me. I was like, oh, what do we do in this situation? It was a learning experience, definitely.
Right. Yeah. And I bet, and once you find that antecedent, those triggers, those pieces, it may change the next time. It may not work next time, and it may completely go off the rails.
Right. Fire alarms are another thing. Fire alarms. I have to I go upstairs and I tell my teacher, I was like, all right, fire alarm's gonna fire
Good
drill's gonna
man.
be at 9 o'clock.
That's how.
9 a.m. 9 a.m. guys, be ready,
Yeah.
9 a.m. And they're preparing their students, and sometimes they leave a little early, and
That's exactly.
it's
Oh,
different.
that you have a good heart, because at my last school, you would find me 20 seconds before rolling my kiddos out, first and foremost, looking like I'm the nervous wreck because I don't, it's loud. It's so loud.
Yeah.
It can escalate anybody, but especially our kiddos. It's almost, it's almost interesting, like scientifically, to see how quickly that decibel or whatever triggers non-preferred behaviors, elopement,
Mm-hmm.
aggressive behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
It's not fun to talk about, but that's a part of our lives, right? So
Mm-hmm.
how do we mitigate for them?
Yeah, yeah. And then part of it too is like, okay, inclusion, right? How do we make sure that our general education students are accepting of our sped
Yeah,
students?
absolutely.
How do we make it to where it's just normal? Like, this is we're all together in this together,
Mm-hmm.
So when we started to come down for recess and lunch, the
Mm-hmm.
kids, I feel like, they're integrating better with the general education population.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that I feel when it's time for the fire alarm to, our fire drills, they're going to be more accepting when they come down, and
Yeah.
they might be making loud noises, or they might run off, and they might look out for them. They might be like,
Yeah.
oh, Mr. Vergara, he's over here. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. And that inclusion part, like making sure
Mm-hmm.
that these, your students with autism, your students with disabilities are included in general education population, then relationships are built, then people are looking out for other people more often. That's so important.
It's everything. And I'm so thankful that you can be that voice of change at that higher level, because it is, that's one of my high horses, and I don't have a lot of them, right? Because we all come from different places, but I will absolutely start screaming in an audience if I see the reality of our teachers are the ones. I am still a teacher, so I am too. We are so stuck in the mud sometimes, and we are so hard on it. It's so hard to have that growth mindset for some reason when it comes to having to deal with our kids. In my school district, this is the first year because inclusion is a whole big thing, and there's a philosophical piece of it too. But our main goal is, in each of our schools, we wanted our students to have access to their neighborhood schools in their general education setting, regardless of where they sit on that curve of high support needs. So we have our highest support need kiddos pushing in with a higher level of support. On paper, it sounds great, but again, if everything isn't put into place, then it's chaos for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. Like, just for instance, lunchtime, right? Our students eat lunch with the general education students, and we had Winter Academy, right? It's smaller, so we had 3 days. Everybody was on winter break, but there were some students that came back for like this additional 3 days of school. Maybe there was 150 students,
Oh wow!
and in 150 students, there was 6 students with autism in my alternative classrooms that came to school. And we said to ourselves, you know what? We're going to have them play during lunchtime with everybody else. We normally don't do this. I was like, they're going to go ahead and eat their lunch and just play
Yeah,
like everybody else. Like everybody else are going to go ahead and
I love
play.
it.
Um, and the one thing that we had, we're like, okay, they're all in this yard,
Mhm.
but everybody has to watch a door. Everybody watch a door so that nobody's leaving. We're here. They're safe in this yard, but you stand in this area by this door, and you stand by this door because we don't want anybody to leave the school. So you're here and you're there, and so like that kind of consideration, you have to keep in mind. Like, okay, they might leave the campus, so you
That's,
are here and you are there, and there's only 2 doors, and nobody's getting out. But they can play here, but nobody's getting
I
out.
am like my stomach almost dropped because it is so much a part of our world, right? And in 12 years, this is my 12th year, so 11 years, I've had kiddos, maybe 2 or 3 kids elope out of the classroom for a second. I am neurotic about it. I'm very scared about it, even though it was, there was a pattern to it. But now that I get in the work that I do, anytime there's a call, you could call it a crisis team, whatever. But I try to be more not inclusive, holistic than that, because you don't want to see me if it's a whole thing. But we had a kiddo that eloped and got about a mile away, and
Mm-hmm.
so every day I mean, we have a safety plan in place. I did an aerial map of the school with names on who's by what door, because
Mm-hmm.
they're pressure points, we call them, because he can get out.
Yeah.
It's huge. But if we do that now, we can have our general ed kids out too, then, because we can meet them there, and then we can be doing that. And why weren't we doing that in the first place?
Yeah.
It's weird. And not every school has a fence, even, right? Like,
Yeah. Well, our school's pretty enclosed, but there are 2 ways that they could get out. If they knew, if I don't even know if they know how to get out, but there are 2 ways, and we're like, okay, we got to guard these 2 doors. And then when we leave the school, our school ends at 2:23, and there's one exit that we go through, and every day, like the whole sped team comes out because we don't want the kids to just leave, right? So the whole sped team comes out, and we're all by the door, and we're making sure we're heading off, kids, and getting them on the bus, and making sure that nobody's eloping, nobody's just leaving
yep,
the
you've
school,
got your little list of who goes to this one.
Yeah, we're just like just watching, and I'm at the door at the furthest end, and I'm like, okay, here are kids. Make sure that everybody goes with who they're supposed to go with, and nobody's leaving the school. It's something that I never considered as a general education teacher or anything. I never considered this until I started to work at this school. I was like, oh, I got to make sure that nobody leaves. Yeah.
That's very, and I would say that's very similar to me. For the last 11 years, I've self-contained as a whole different conversation, and people have lots of feelings, but I knew that I could keep my space safe and secure in terms of kids not eloping or not getting out, because that doesn't look good when somebody's trying to bolt out of your room. I'm not that bad of a teacher, but this year it's so unique because I'm K-5 as well. The entirety of the school, anytime that there is crisis that is incredibly like violent or things like that, that's when I get involved. And I agree. I had no idea. I used to say I had the hardest job, but it's keeping kids safe outside of their classrooms in the building community, not just in our classroom and getting to the buses. They do everything else. Holy Vergara, it's so scary sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And then, it was same. We're on the same topic here, special education. I don't know if you guys are fully staffed,
Nope.
but we're not fully staffed. So we're supposed to have a certain amount of PARs in the classroom, and we don't have we're not fully staffed, I feel, and that's such an issue.
Yeah.
And it's so discouraging. I feel it's so discouraging for the teacher and the PARs in the classroom because they feel like they can't do all that they can because they don't have enough personnel to help with that, with the classroom.
Yeah.
Very difficult. I don't know how it is in Minnesota.
It's shocker. It's just as bad, I think. And now that I'm on this administration side, in that, to be in this position, I have my director of special ed license as well. So like, it's fun. I get to see more kids throughout the day. It's awesome. I don't have a caseload, but it's just different. And in the staffing world, I was a sub twice last week in our DCD, which is a developmental cognitive delay classroom, K-5 kiddos jumping, and I love it. But also I'm like, so we're having other staff members going in sub now because I've not seen a sub. We can't get them. We're absolutely, you were so right. Like talk to my teachers too, and I help out as much as I can. That being said, and this is something that Kibby and I talk about a lot, and like, make it work. That, but as long as your administration is good to you, you know what I mean? You can't physically bring in new bodies just out of thin air. It's not going to happen. Paraprofessionals especially have some of the most intense work in our schools with their kids.
Mm-hmm.
We get the most amazing data from them. They are with our kids. They understand our kids better than we as teachers do a lot of time because of all of this stuff. But yeah, we're supposed to have 2 paras per classroom full time in there. They're not to leave. There's all these rules and regulations, but we're down, I think, 7 or 8 paraprofessionals, which then if you're saying we're going to do this inclusive model, it's going to look really good. Well, what does it look like? And from my perspective, it's been a lot of finding children not in the classroom. It's terrible.
Yeah, and that's the pushback. What I tell my classroom, my teachers and the par is like, hey, let's spend more time outside with the general education students. It's like, yeah, but we don't have enough personnel. I get what you're saying, but we don't have enough personnel to pull that off.
Right?
And
Get creative. I'm sorry to be a jerk, but like this, you're a teacher. Figure it out.
yeah, no, I could, like, I don't think it's that easy. I don't think it's
you're
that
right.
easy to be like, hey, just figure it out. Because I feel like, if you're the classroom teacher and then you have one para, let's just say, and you have 8 alternative students, and
That's very
let's
true.
say six of them need diaper changing, and half of them are not, almost all of them are not nonverbal,
Yep.
and you put them on the playground with everybody else, it's like, what do we? That's a tough one.
Absolutely.
That's a tough call.
That is very true too. And like, I'm kind of nonchalant about it because I've also been the teacher that's like, I can't go to recess because it's just me with 8 4-year-olds. That's a recipe for disaster. But I love that our teachers most of our whole department is new. I think there's like 14 special ed teachers. We're all new from different districts. So it's really nice to figure this out with each other. But it is absolutely like we have to be there for each other, like especially with toileting, all that adaptive support piece, like how, when, what, and we have 1 bathroom for 3 classrooms of this program. So with the logistics of just getting outside of Minnesota, have you ever watched a kid? I mean, any kids get into their snowsuits. It's about 19 hours just
I
to
can't
get
even
in.
imagine that. That's a whole different level.
Yeah.
Having to put a whole snowsuit on and go outside and it's like minus 10 degrees.
Right.
I
And of course, I'm like, do we really have to put that on? Can we just?
Yeah.
And the teacher's like, yes. Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's a whole different level. That's nothing like we see over here in California at all.
It's like too. Again, like, people hear that I was an early childhood special ed teacher, and I advocate for that so much because it is so critical, especially with our autistic students, to help support them and being them. I started in 2013, and we still learned almost in that ABA way of like, we're going to turn off those atypical behaviors because it makes people uncomfortable, which is so icky to say now. Rather, we are in this piece of, and you were talking at the beginning a little bit about how the exposure to their general education peers and things like that, it is everything. And there's a lot of mess that teachers talk a lot of unkind things about all students in their classrooms. But I feel like, at least where I'm at, when I've seen the vast majority of general education students, whether or not they know these students, but like, to them, they don't care in that he's stimming. What doesn't matter? He's not a nuisance. It's not going to bother them. They are in with their peers, and it looks different. It absolutely may look different, but that is the point, I guess, is that they are doing their own, perseverances or whatever.
Yeah. How do you keep morale up?
That's a really good one. And we're in the middle of something now, and I hated in the classroom being like, oh, in our weekly newsletter, like, send a shout out. Actually, I liked those. So I do a shout out Google form with our team, and not just but it's specifically for little things, because I noticed, especially like right after Halloween, it was just a really tough time for our kids. We had, I think, most of our pairs out all on one day. It was so scary. But there's all these little neat things that happen through the day. And because I'm in all the classrooms, I'm, all over the place. I hear, this kid did this, he was able to do it, he wrote it, whatever, all those little things. That's what we have trouble with remembering when it's like, okay, but there was all this fire everywhere else. So that's been really nice in that we decompress, and we blow off steam and all that stuff. But I would forget those little positive pieces throughout the day. And I think that that's helped a little bit. I also, when I schedule, like they can take an extra prep and I will sub in, meet with them before and after. Like morale is absolutely, our district's structured in a little bit of a different way in that I do all of the assessment for behaviors, like functional behavior assessments and things like that.
Yeah.
But also, I coach the teachers, special ed and general education, on that relationship building and that how we support across the board, right? Because I'll know because I'll get a call that you've triggered our student again, even though we've talked. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
that's the fun part is really digging in with them, especially our gen ed teachers or just anyone that sticks their heels in. Like it won't work. It's crazy. I see it all the time. It's like I'm a magician, or something. It's like I have to build relationships with grown-ups. That's hard. Not the parents I've had. That's one of I think my biggest strengths has been that familial, especially in early childhood when everything is new and terrifying. Teachers, we get stuck in the mud, and I don't like that. So I try to be funny about things, but you're going to do the right thing for kids. So I have to be more of a dick too sometimes. Excuse my language.
Yeah. What exactly, as a behavior interventionist, what exactly is your job in
Thank you
that
for
title in Minnesota in your school district? What exactly is that?
yeah. So and we call them bizes. So BIS. So if I say biz, that's what it is. But we're in a very large district in Minnesota, and the behavior specialist we most up until this year, every one of the bizes there's one for each. Well, how many do we have? Gosh, we have a lot of schools. Everybody has like 2 or 3 schools,
Mhm.
and in that zone, they are responsible for all of the functional behavior assessments, all of the data collection, all of the trainings for paraprofessionals. We get to do all of the trainings for our teachers. We get to do the curriculum stuff with them in the classroom. If there is, the main thing is when there is physical violence from a student, there's, whatever it is that is just, it is out of bounds with the teacher, we go in and we coach, whether that's coaching the paras or the teacher, and it's in a very specific way, and it's kind of impressive in that you have to be watching as well because I'm not going to be here next week, kind of a thing, and you can do it. So it's very much like all over the place, trying to mitigate, trying to do that whole. We're going to prepare because we don't want to do all the things that are going to trigger our kids. But so there's that
Yeah.
aspect of it. I also have my walkie, and anytime during the day that there is a student who has an office call gets made, we'll say, because a lot of them are not appropriate calls, if that makes sense, especially at the beginning of
Mhm.
the year. But I do that. We do a lot of work on, always call it a circle of a behavior that we all have. Like when I'm frustrated, I got to go through it at whatever it is. If a kid swore at another kid, there's a repair piece at the end, and there's a make a plan piece, regardless of, cognitive functioning or things like that. It's unique to each kiddo, but we are in a room. We have a specific room that I am in with another Fed 3 high support level needs teacher, and it is a place for scheduled breaks for our students with special education services that we have done the data tracking that we try to mitigate, like, oh, he's having a really hard time at this time, let's get that break in 10 minutes before that, etc. It's also for unscheduled breaks. If our kids ask or even make a signal, they're getting out because they have the right to be who they are. So we have to do all of that data
Mhm.
tracking, and then we also we just do whatever else is needed. Each of our but the unique thing is, my school is I'm there all day, every day for 5. I'm the only one. I have a
Five days.
very needy school, and instead of, I technically have 3 schools that I get to work with, but my partner, she does the other 2, and our school, which I love, I don't ever want to leave my school.
Mhm.
It's like, why is everybody else talking about going around? Like and my school's a circle, so it's a continuous circle every day, all day long. I was like, I want to go
Yeah.
to school. So it's just really being that support system. And I've already found some pitfalls that I didn't think I would fall into, in terms of, I am not to be a crutch, I am not a magician, and that when I work with kiddos who are especially in those most vulnerable moments of frustration, I'm looking at you as teacher too, like, to how are we going to support kids in that process? Right? It's very nuanced and very. It's amazing that sometimes we just don't want to hear how to do things in a way that's good for kids.
Yeah.
That's
That's a tough call. You work with all students with IEPs?
Yeah, we have our yeah. So every student on an IEP is directed to myself and then the special education lead teacher at my school, and we have the general education kiddos. If they're having a hard time, they are with the counselors.
Okay.
So it's kind of nice to divide and conquer in that I know my kiddos, and that's why I love being at the school. I'm not just somebody that shows up when you're being out of bounds, which is, I hate that. I spent the I went to morning meetings. I got to know these kids. I learned math that I didn't even know in the fifth grade. It was really nice because their expectations, this, that, of course, we're not, these kids aren't new. Kids are incredibly intelligent.
Yeah.
How are we going to mitigate all that stuff? And it's us a lot of the time, myself included. I'm also a trigger. I'm sure you can tell that I probably triggered my students before.
So how do you teach that to teachers that they could be the trigger sometimes? How do you explain that?
That's a really good question in that I thought it was going to be super easy and just my personality being so almost like I'm too nice. And like I reflected, be like, am I hurting kids? Like, am I not supporting kids by being non-confrontational? So this has been a year of having those times. I meet with every special ed teacher for about an hour a week privately with them. And in those moments, it's really important at the beginning of everything to say, like, there's a couple things that it's going to look worse before it gets better, for example, and I just need you to trust me. So trying to build that relationship with them, which kind of sucks because it feels like I'm trying to like sell them something.
Yeah.
But even in special education, it's like, well, we tried it once and it didn't work, which is why we have a data collection set that we're collecting for 6-week increments. It's putting a lot on our teachers, and I totally understand that. You're having non-preferred behaviors in your classroom, regardless of what is happening. Then you have to do an interview with me. Then you have to do coaching. And if you're the trigger, I've just started saying we can all be the trigger. And I always put myself out there first. I've done everything that I'm saying that may be done there. I've had teachers, the biggest one I see is, especially when they leave the room on an unscheduled break and they come back, until he apologizes, he can't come in. And I literally said, are you fucking kidding me? I can't do that. And then I get dysregulated with the teachers because these kids work so hard on being themselves.
Yeah.
So it's just, you have to tell them. But if I put myself in that with them, hopefully it doesn't sound as accusatory, because we all are, even our own children, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It is what,
Yeah. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. Like, whenever I work with students with difficult behavior, it's always a conversation first. Like, I'm not trying to be punitive. I'm not trying to be like, I even put that aside. I'm like, when they come to my office, I'm like, okay, come in, sit down. What happened? Tell me what happened.
yeah.
We're not worried about calling your parents right now or giving you a punishment, or just tell me what happened. Why did you do that? Tell me what happened.
Yeah.
And I just need to hear them out. Let me just hear you out, and then we could talk about solutions and how we're going to resolve this situation. But right now, just breathe, talk to me. Let's hear why you did this, and then
I
let's
love
offer
it.
some other strategies on how to deal with a similar situation like this if this occurs again.
It's like you're in my
That's
head in
what we
my
do.
school.
Yeah.
It's everything, and it's both easy and super difficult. And we're very similar in that when you come into the room, if it's especially if you're having a hard time, they get 5 minutes with fidgets in their calms, whatever they need independently.
Mhm.
I'm here for you, but we're not going to, same thing. That's not the point. I want your safe body and mind to be
Mhm.
present here learning at school. And we do that same piece too of like, let's talk about it. Let's get our side of the story. What's going on? If it was more than one, we take it very seriously, because that's trying to teach some as much social emotional literacy and competency as possible. And then that last piece of what's the plan? What are we going to make a plan for? And I just love seeing these third graders make these big plans that they want to sign. We're just writing on like, we're just talking, but I love that. Like, let's take that. And I think that way that you interact with your kiddos is similar to mine in that I get you now. I get to see you now. That's why it's great. I'm not here to be punitive or
Mhm.
unkind or a jackass, or like, I don't want to be a threat.
Mhm.
Mr. Armstrong will not show up as a threat. Okay. No, thank you.
Yeah.
And that's been a lot of work, but it's good work because now kids are coming without being.
Yeah, and let's take the idea of threat. Let's take the idea of
Mm-hmm.
threat and high standards, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so when I think about high standards, when the kids come in and speak to me, I always say something like, "Hey, I expect more from you.
Mm-hmm.
Your teacher expects more from you, right? I expect the best from you." Like these statements, right? And then a threat in my mind, is like, "Oh, well, like being angry, raising my
Mm-hmm.
voice, looking intimidating," right? Now, both actions um, can get the student to do something, but I feel like one is builds relationship,
That's
right? One builds relationship, one tears down relationship. One
absolutely.
makes them afraid of you,
Mm-hmm.
and they listen because they're afraid. And one is like, I respect Mr. Vergara. He holds me
Absolutely.
to a high standard. He doesn't allow me to say curse words in my classroom. He
Mm-hmm.
doesn't allow me to misbehave in the classroom because he'll bring it up in front of me. So I think that if people did that more, where they held high standards, and it was like you just you build relationships by doing something like that
Mm-hmm.
versus being a threat.
Absolutely. I could not. Can you put that on a piece of paper or a
Yeah.
T-shirt or something? Because that also says to me that fundamentally you are open to the idea and the reality that like behaviors are forms of communications. Kids do not do
Mhm.
things, and I always go to the extreme because every child is terrible to a lot of these teachers, and they're throwing
Mhm.
chairs, which I've never actually seen. But the idea that like they're not doing it when we get into the back brain, that whatever that we're not in
Yeah.
control in those moments. It's
Yeah.
it's not them being jerks. That is not a part of their anything, and that's the disconnect for me. So a
Yeah.
lot of the time, it's not a
And then
physical
it
disability. So
and then it's like it's it's hard to teach that to any individual.
Mhm.
Let's just not say teachers, but just any
Yeah.
individual in the school building where like let teach the idea that these are kids, they're going to
Mhm.
make mistakes, and
Mhm.
let's forgive them, and every day is a new day.
Absolutely.
Every day is a new day, and we're going to forgive them,
Every
and every day is a new day. That's kind of hard for some individuals. I feel like they
Mhm.
have a hard time doing that, and then it makes things worse.
It makes it so much worse for everybody, and you
Yeah.
too, because you're getting calls too, and it's nobody's winning, and it's hard because from your perspective. And I trust teachers. I love teachers. We if we don't have a growth mindset, the day I say I know everything, put me away because I shouldn't be a teacher at that point. Tell me all the things that will help me be better. That biggest piece of that behavior, especially students, a lot of them present and have the EBD, emotional behavior disorder label, and automatically people are teachers. I don't want any EBD kids in my room. Well, we're not ever going to say that again. Those words won't come out of your mouth ever again.
Mhm.
We're already going to start treating them, thinking about them, and interacting with them in different ways. Well, I expect everything out of our kids. We have the same curriculum. We just, our scaffolding and unique pieces per kiddo is extra to really get them to hone in on things. That disconnect or that belief of, you know, oh, he's just going to go out with Mr. Vergara and he's going to get a candy and come back. Like, I don't have a drawer of candy that everybody, and I would have eaten it already. It is about that
Yeah.
relationship with the kid. I want him to know that he can come safe and he can tear apart the room. And he knows he
Yeah.
could come. Does that, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
incremental change, but it is incredibly difficult to look at a group of educators in the face and say that to them because I know they're going to say mean things, and that's fine. Like I get it. But it's how it is.
I don't know how true that statement is. I don't know if I don't know any administrators that give them lollipops and send them on their
Right?
way. Like you see that in the comments and certain social media, even in
Capability.
my social media comments. But I've never I never got a kid to come in and be like, "Hey, sit down. Here's a lollipop and a Coca-Cola, and I'm gonna send
Right?
you back in 20 minutes."
He's like,
I've
where's
never done
my
that.
Coca-Cola? I did a good job today.
Yeah,
And
I've
yeah,
never done that.
good. And like, because it makes sense. It's again, not to in that behavior world. It's like, so we're just going to reinforce that. Okay, great. I'm never going to come in again because if you're going to do that, then that's on you. I, the KB especially, she's so good with this world that it is a trope of especially the lollipop and the chair throwing. I've seen a grown up throw a chair. I have not seen kids throw a chair. It's
I've seen a kid throw a chair. I've seen it. It's happened in my one of the schools I worked at. It's happened, um, but it's rare. It's very rare to see that. At
it's
least
not
at
as
the
frequent
schools
as they
that I
make it
worked
sound.
at.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the schools that I've worked at, I've only seen it one time, and I've been working in this field for 27 years or something like that. I've only seen it one
Uh,
time. But like, let's just take the idea of giving away treats and dismissing the problem and sending them back to classroom. If you were to do that as administrator, you would compound the problems. Your
mhm.
problems would increase so much more.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Right, like if you were just sending kids away, like here's a lollipop, sit down for a second, then go back to yours, and your problems would increase, and then it would just be a terrible work environment, terrible school environment, and I don't see how anybody would want to do that. I don't get it.
I
Yeah,
We had a professional development last week that I got to teach to paras, new paras, and that was a lot of the topic of conversation in that the nuance between the word, which you alluded to, like getting teachers to buy in and be about it, the difference between reinforcing and, oh gosh, I just blanked, reinforcement and consequence, and how now we're really starting to call it punishment, which is a whole thing to say that, but it is not in a punitive way. We're not even saying behaviors are negative or they're just behaviors. And
yeah,
what is a consequence versus that? And we go through these little stories that I created about kiddos. He punched a kid in the face after he called him a name. Is it a consequence? Was that a reinforcement? If the teacher goes and gives him a candy every time, it's interesting because they're like, I've seen so many times teachers say, well, he stopped because he gave him an iPad. And if you've noticed, he's done it 18 times this week. And now it's hard in the beginning. That's the part that I want to get across to our staff the most, is that especially in the beginning and especially those first 6 weeks, it's going to seem like you're going backwards a lot of the time. That disruptiveness of it, I think they call it exhaustion to extinction. It's going to be there, but that is part of our people that say, I just want to teach. That is a part of it though, with supports.
yeah.
Don't write off a behavior as something intentional to you, because a behavior is a behavior.
Yeah, I feel like there's these universal truths, right? Like there's these things that across all fields it works.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just take that idea about giving an iPad to somebody, whatever. Um, if you were consistent, like being consistent, like in anything, like if you were consistent with budgeting,
Mm-hmm.
right, and you budget every month, you kept your budget, then you would, by the end of the year, you'd save X amount of money, and it would be great. If you were consistent with your diet, for instance, and you just
Absolutely.
stuck to your diet, you would lose weight. You would just lose
Mm-hmm.
weight if you were just consistent with it.
Yeah.
You take that same idea of consistency and you go in the classroom, you talk about behaviors. And if you just establish routines and build relationships and you're consistent with it across the board, and you don't give in and you're not giving the iPad when somebody, and you just do it across the board and you're consistent, it's going to work. It's going to work, just like budgeting, just like exercise, just like whatever. Being consistent for the period of time. Yeah, it's going to be hard. Just like dieting at the very first month or so is going to be hard. Just like keeping a budget and not buying things on Amazon and through your phone is hard.
It's so hard. I'm sorry.
Right? It's so hard, and it's the same thing in the classroom. It's going to be hard to keep these routines, these procedures at the very beginning, the first few months. But once you got it, now classroom management is easy, right? It's so easy.
Absolutely.
That's the way to do it.
And I'm lucky that in fact, interacting with even students with IEPs that are in general ed is so out of bounds for me, because I've always worked only with students who show the need to be in that most restrictive environment. So
yeah.
it sucks because is like you just said, it's for your kiddo and it's for you. It makes your life so much easier. Another part of our job is when we have, for instance, a kiddo had to go to modified days because people were getting hurt, and we would give him teacher gave him the iPad and didn't see a problem with it, and whatever. I'm not here for that, but I was in there for 2 weeks straight with him, and it was exactly what we thought. And he did beautifully. He did amazing. Did I get whacked? Yeah, I put myself in a couple of situations that I shouldn't have. That's on me. But it got so much better after it got so much worse.
Yeah.
And then, our kids are sad. He wanted iPad because you gave it to him every day for like 3 hours. What?
Yeah.
Oof,
I feel like you have to be brave. Like bravery is so important. You have to be brave. You have to hold that hard line, right? And a lot of times people just give in. They just give in and they don't want to hold that hard line, and they lack bravery and courage. And maybe they don't have the right support as well.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't have the
Very
right
true.
support, the admin team supporting them or other people supporting them. And they just say, you know what, if I'm not being supported, then I'm just going to go ahead and just do what's best for
Mhm.
me. And that might
Yeah,
be giving somebody an iPad for X amount of
absolutely.
time.
100%. I've put on a Disney movie in my last world because I mean, I'm alone with 8 babies. What I need you to look over here while I'm doing other, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we got to do what we got to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, it's just, it's tough. And being in education 2025, going to 2025 is going, it's difficult. It's not an easy job and it's not for everybody. This job, before I used to think, you know what, more people could become a teacher. It's easier
Yeah.
to become a teacher. In 2025, it's a lot more difficult. It's a lot more difficult, and I think that social media compounds the fact that it's difficult because if you're on the phone and you see like 10
Mhm.
videos of students are jerks and parents are
Yep.
jerks and admin doesn't do anything, then you're gonna believe that
Absolutely.
you're gonna believe that your job sucks.
Right. And it used to be that you would decompress, but TikTok is so wonderful and it's so accessible. If I'm mad enough and I'm in my back of my brain, I'm going to get on there and say some stuff I don't mean, but is going to live with me forever. And that's awful that
Yeah.
teachers are, we, as a teacher, you're like, I've understood from nobody lied and said, no, you're not going to be held to a higher standard and not be paid. I knew that going in. So I
Yeah.
have a little bit of some thoughts about that. And I try to meet our teachers where they're at, but don't get on the internet and disparage kids for the love of God.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's tough. That's like you work with kids. You the parents are gonna see it. Kids are gonna see it.
yep.
You know, your admin is gonna see it. Somebody's gonna send it to them. You know, something. You know, a parent's
Uh
gonna come to the office and say, "This is what this
huh.
teacher said about. Take a look at this
So
video."
brazen, isn't it? Getting
Yeah,
online, talking a big game, and now what? What are you going to say in that meeting? When?
yeah, and it doesn't even help because if let's say you're a student and you saw that your high school teacher was talking bad about you and then you go in the classroom, you're not going to listen more. You're going to be like,
Absolutely.
screw him or her.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to be worse. I'm going to
Period.
be worse now. I,
It's.
I know I would be worse if I saw a
I would
video
too.
and it was indirectly toward me. I'm
Uh
like,
huh.
oh, watch when I go back to class.
Period.
Watch when I go back to
Mhm.
class.
I have my degree in petty, and
Yeah.
I would play that game because you open yourself up to it, and people are sending their children to you, and especially in our world, and especially in our ICR admin, that's when it's when something big occurs. That's when admin also does a lot of that facilitating. So it's like you get to see a lot of that. Oh my goodness, how do we pull it all together without putting things on the internet and calling kids monsters? Essentially, um, it's icky to see, but I'm kind of glad I see. I either try to do stupid, funny videos about teachers being silly, not kids, or like talking about like the law or whatever it is, and just my opinions. And that's none of it is going to be about a kid. None of it is going to be about how a kid is. We have to be our calmest at when they're their least calm.
Yeah, when I think about my social media presence, it's like, okay, how do I just be positive and
Very
motivating?
positive. It's
That
great.
that how do I be positive, motivating? And I make almost a video a day, or maybe even two sometimes. And I feel like I just stick and move. Like I make a video, move on, make
Yeah.
another video, move on. And sometimes I don't even get to some of these comments. Or sometimes like, you know what, I made another video. I'm past that already.
Right.
And I just keep moving and I keep moving and I don't. When I first started, I would go back and some of these comments were ridiculous. And I was like, it was discouraging. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I just got to keep moving forward. Don't interact with these comments right here because I can't, there's no winning.
Absolutely.
There's no winning
Yeah.
at all. There's no winning at all. So it's like, you said that I'm going to move on and I'm going to make a new video and I'm only going to speak about the things that I want to speak about.
Period.
And that's it. And I just I keep moving.
There's some weird folks out there that are very unkind, and like that's what I found your podcast and your videos before this job, but when I got it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect because you are talking about, and I've noticed it with my other mutuals who are early childhood's kind of fluffy. It's cute, it's fun. It is hard when kids are older and they are showing non aggressive behaviors like that. It's not cute it's very difficult and it's very sensitive, I think. So you are able to talk about difficult behaviors and what that all entails without making kids feel guilty, parents feel guilty. In fact, I'm sure parents feel more supported and understood by keeping it let's keep it real and know that we're there for you.
Yeah, and it comes from in my mind, for me, it comes from a good place. Like I have no bad intentions about any person, video, whatever I'm making. It's always to help somebody else out.
Yeah.
Whatever I'm making, and that helps me keep a clear head.
Mm-hmm.
That helps me keep a clear conscience, because if I'm making things that are just positive and it's not vindictive or against anybody else, or it's just like here's a video on, like I made a video about, hey, it's winter vacation, let's spend time with our children,
Yeah.
and it was me and my son working out. It was me and my
I
son
thought
working
that
out.
was a cute video. I like that one.
Yeah, I was like, you know what? Let's make this video. Let's make a video of me working out. Maybe it'll motivate somebody to
Yeah.
go to the gym with their kids, or I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's just it, like that's the approach that I take. You could make a negative video and say something like, oh, parents don't do anything with their kids. Why don't they do anything with their kids? Or you could demonstrate that you're doing something to your kids and try to motivate some people to go ahead and spend time with their kids.
Absolutely.
So I don't know. It's how you present it. It's tricky.
Talking about those subjects, because again, I like the funny videos that I can make about, because in my world, it was never my parents. I met with my parents every beginning of every year. And how do we talk to parents? How do we not talk to parents? To the point I was neurotic enough that I met with our specialist in that if parents cry, they don't touch them. Here's the rules. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to get them to trust us by serving them and supporting them.
Yeah.
But we're also going to talk about, I did once a week little clinics where families could come in and we could fill out paperwork for SSI, or we could more, not an emergency things.
Mm-hmm.
It's once you get them in, I love that. I love being that. I hope that I have that piece of change. Just like that video. I didn't go to the gym. Trust me. But I love that you did something for you and your son in that moment too. Like, that's also a part of this whole experience, right? That doesn't get talked about a lot.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know. Social media is funny. Social media is funny. And, I have a whole other life that nobody knows about, I just put out stuff like, here's about my, students with difficult behavior, and here's my educational world. And sometimes I'll post some workout videos or whatever. And then that's it. That's all I'll post about, really. But there's all kinds of other things, but I just don't post everything.
You get to be the keeper of your peace in life, because it's amazing, right? What people put, you don't need to be on live napping. I don't understand it. You're not that excited.
Yeah.
You have a right to the privacy that you want, because you're also supporting and giving strategies. And I love that you talk about a lot. You, in some way or another, you'll ask a question of well, what do you do when? Let's just be realistic. My interpretation is behaviors just happen. That is a part of our experience, regardless of severity or duration. But then what? What are you going to do? And it's almost like you're walking through it with that conversation, rather than being standoffish, which a lot of people, I feel may perceive other people.
Yeah. And I truly want to know. I want to know maybe you have a better idea than me. Maybe you have a better idea than me, and maybe you could help me out, because all I know is that I'm here for the kid. I'm trying to love, demonstrate love toward the student, toward his family, make sure that he has a successful future. And the way I'm doing it is X, Y, and Z. But if you have a better way to do that, then show me. That's it. So.
And that idea of going back to and it gets, little things get stuck in my craw that we just want to teach. I understand. I understand that a lot of this is part of it. The other piece, I feel is it just me, or every school in America except mine are full of administrators who refuse to even speak to their teachers when they're getting murdered in a class. I don't understand why we're sitting all the way over here. I get to work with kids who on paper have that highest intensity of behavior. And I'm either I'm just so trauma informed or numb, or you're zhuzhing it up a little bit because you want to get, some likes and stuff, and you're doing your outfit of the day. I don't have time to wear clothes that are nice anymore. I don't do outfits. You know what I mean? Come on.
Social media is crazy.
It's crazy.
It's crazy, and I never thought, I started making these little videos. I never thought that I'd have this many followers, or that some of my videos would take off, or I'd have a podcast. I never thought any of that. I was just starting to make things, and now going into 2025, I'm like, okay, let's be more strategic.
Yeah.
Let's be more strategic, and let's see what you could really do now if you really were strategic about it, and you were more creative, and you plan things out a little bit better. Where could this go? That's something that's going through my mind right now in 2025.
I love that, especially from your perspective as an administrator, a special education administrator, that you're like a unicorn in that
Yeah.
you're giving pieces of your experience out there, which like you are showing what real life is like for somebody in your position, rather than what I think frustration can bring out in others to say is happening, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
again, what I like about your videos and the types of people I follow is humility. And like, like I said, I've accidentally done everything that I'm saying don't do. It's not against you. It's all for everybody, kind of a thing. And I really appreciate that about your videos as well. It feels good to know that there's somebody at that level who's advocating for kids. And does it always look good? No. Does it always feel good? Probably absolutely not. Doing what you have to do for kids, and somebody's going to be mad at you a lot of the time.
Yeah. You had put in when I sent you the invite, I sent you the invite and you filled out that little form. You had put humanity, and that stood out to me. You had mentioned humanity and the importance of just, I don't know, understanding the work. We work with humans. We work with people. We work with people with feelings and emotions and struggles.
Absolutely.
And, let's keep that in mind.
It is the most, I think that is my biggest soapbox, in that when I see, it's disgusting to even say, but like in jest, I don't care, especially younger kiddos or more impacted kiddos, they have a right to the human dignity that anybody else does, whether or not they are understanding of it, care about it in that moment. For example, if they are wearing diapers in 5th grade, if you shame them again, I'm going to meet you outside. We do not shame children. We do not infantilize them. We don't talk like that. That is disgusting behavior. You can do that to your own kid, but think about it in a different context, right? Like, these are not like playthings. These are somebody's baby. And it's just because they don't speak, or just because they are not presenting in a way that we think is typical, they are less than, and they are treated that way. And I know I've probably done that consciously or subconsciously too. I've even said before, oh, I didn't know he was one of ours. What, Mitchell? What does that even mean? I don't have a gang of children that follow me around. But the reality is, I could tell the difference between Down syndrome and a kid with it's visible. Be better, though. Humanity is everything. If we don't have that, then we all just need to get out and not do this, because what's the point then, right?
That's right. That's right. Well, Mr. Armstrong, we're coming toward the end right here, toward the end of our podcast. And then when we get toward the end of the podcast, I always ask my guests, what are some tips that they could give to future educators who are wanting to join the field? What tips would you give them?
First of all, I want people to be teachers, and I love that. I love that there's still people, teachers. It's something God-given. It has to be, because it's good work. I want every single teacher going in, gen ed, special. We could teach underwater basket weaving. You're going to have really good days, and you're going to have really bad days all throughout your career. But the reality is, it's almost never going to be kids. It's not kids. So just be aware of that. That is okay to have bad days.
Yeah.
I also would always want to remind them that we have to be the pushers. We have to be the agitators, especially special education teachers. We are oftentimes the lifeline between our students in a placement setting, being treated a certain way, initially getting put into a self-contained classroom, for example. And we know data shows that kids are in there forever a lot of the time. Advocate for your kids, even if you think you're ruffling feathers. I know that that's going to be so hard. And myself, I've not a lot sometimes, but do it, because these are your kids, and their future is in your hands. And then I also always give yourself, and it sounds so cliche, but I truly mean it, give grace to yourself and those around you who may not understand the nuances of what you do. I've found myself getting real sassy with people because they don't understand and think that oh, you're just a biz, you just hang out with kids. I don't need to escalate, right? Be interested. I'm going to give grace, and I'm going to
Yeah.
come back to it. Don't let it eat you. I see it all the time. There's so many teachers. A lot of teachers are just, I think, very at a 10 all the time, which is a great career choice when you're, anxiety ridden all the time. You are
Mm-hmm.
doing good. You are doing beautiful work with kids, but it's okay to give yourself grace and say, you know what, I'll pick it up tomorrow. Just like you said, tomorrow's a new
Yeah,
day, and I'm glad that you're here.
that's right. Well, Mitchell, thank you so much for you taking
Thank you.
taking the time to be here on the podcast. I greatly appreciate it. All the way from Minnesota.
One and
We
only.
did it. We made it happen.
We've got nothing up here. It's cold and just angry. That's all we got.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and have a wonderful night.